Time for us to begin. If you can make your way in and get a seat. Do y'all have the PowerPoint ready for class? There we go. Great. Thank you. It is good to see everyone this morning. It probably seems odd. Ben and I have actually traded places this morning. It was kind of an accident. He was going to preach for me because of the fact that I was out of town getting this new fancy chair that I'm in. And I got back a little bit early. And since the class this morning is on 1 Peter 5 dealing with elders, Ben had asked Dan Huffines to teach the class. And Dan had agreed to do that. But then, of course, Dan's wife had been in the hospital. And so Dan called me and asked me to teach class. And I said I would. So I'm preaching tonight and teaching the class today, and so things kind of got flip-flopped, but I'm glad to have the opportunity. I'm going to take a minute and tell you about this chair because everybody is asking me about it. I have been in New Hampshire getting this chair this week. My dad and I drove up there. We spent 2 days and drove about, I forget how many. Round trip was 2,200 miles we drove in 4 days. So we drove 10 hours Monday, 10 hours Tuesday. The next 2 days they gave me pretty extensive training on this chair because it will do amazing things. It can climb stairs, which is incredible. And they took me up and down, up and down, up and down. They want to be sure that you really have the hang of it before they will let you go. And they stand there holding on to it the whole time. I guess for liability's sake, they're scared of what might happen. But you get to the top of the stairs, which is, I don't know how much it is, 10, 12 stairs, something like that. So you get to the top, and this chair weighs 260 pounds, and I weigh 160 pounds. So over 400 pounds, you get to the edge of the stairs, and they tell you, go ahead and go off the edge. You know the feeling when you're on a roller coaster? And you get right to the top and they hold you there just to terrify you, and then it starts down. When you make that first step, that's what it feels like. 400 pounds is about to go down the steps, but then one after another, the wheels turn. I put a video of it on Facebook if you're on there and you want to see it. But I did that, and then I went back up and down until they said that they felt like I had mastered it. It also will stand, and it takes me up to about 5'11". I used to be only 5'7", so I'll do anything to get a few inches. And so that's nice to be able to look people in the eyes again. And it also has four-wheel drive capability that is amazing. It will go over curbs, which you don't think about it, but when you're in a wheelchair, a curb is a big obstacle. It will go through sand, grass, mud, things that I typically cannot go through. So I am very glad to have it and very blessed. And I'll tell you some more stories about it as we go on. But it has been a great blessing. We are in 1 Peter chapter 5. And we're going to cover the first 4 verses here dealing with elders. I'm going to read it and then we're going to break it down. 1 Peter 5 and verse 1 says, "The elders who are among you I exhort, I who am a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that will be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, not as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears," see, elders are shepherds, "but when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away." Now, brethren, this section deals with elders, and Ben and I discussed whether he should go ahead and teach the class. He said, maybe you should, since you have served as an elder. I served as an elder for 7 years. 3 years at North Charleston and 4 years at South Haven before I came here. It is the most difficult, most stressful job I have ever done. I have preached coming up nearly 30 years, but being an elder is far more stressful. You're dealing with things that relate to eternal consequences. You must give an account for not only your own soul, but the souls of other people. Oftentimes you're making decisions that people don't like, and they complain about it. The elders don't always agree with one another. Now, when they come out, they have to be unified, but sometimes in meetings, the elders don't agree, and that is a very difficult thing to work through. You're dealing with difficulties in the lives of members. You're dealing with marriage, divorce, and remarriage problems that are very, very tough. New members come in, and you're talking to them, and oftentimes you've got to ask the difficult questions because you don't want to invite a false teacher in. You don't want to bring in someone who's in an unscriptural marriage. You've got to find out about things like this. The elders have to deal with withdrawal of fellowship. Has a person gotten to the point that we need to take action? And if we don't, our souls are going to be in danger. Elders are dealing with the worship services, trying to make it the best it can be. You want to have good song leaders. You want the preacher to preach the things that he needs to be preaching on. You've got to take care of teachers and classes and oversee the deacons. It is a very, very difficult job. And though I had served as a preacher for many years prior to being an elder, you think you've got a good grasp on what elders are dealing with, but you really don't. Being an elder is a very difficult task, and I thank God for good elders. We have good elders here at the Willow Avenue congregation. I have worked with a number of congregations, and I believe our elders here are some of the best that I have ever had the privilege to serve under, and I am so thankful for them. And you should take the opportunity to thank the elders and appreciate what they do. Elders have sleepless nights. I will tell you that there are many things that are going on in the congregation always that you don't know about. And sometimes people will come and complain to the eldership, and if they knew the things that were going on, they wouldn't complain about them. Many of the things elders are already addressing, and our elders haven't asked me to say any of this. I'm just saying from things I know and things that I have experienced, the difficulties that elders are facing. As an elder, I have gone to bed at night worrying about things in the congregation. I wake up the next morning with them weighing on my mind. Brother Glenn Kiley wrote a book about elders. He served as an elder for a number of years. It's called Awake at Night. And he goes through all these different scenarios that elderships all over the brotherhood have turned into him and asked him about. And he does classes on that at Polishing the Pulpit. Being an elder is a very, very difficult job. Now, Peter says some things here in 1 Peter chapter 5 that relate to elders. And I just want to go through this, and we're going to pick out some of these things. I doubt that I can cover this in one class, Ben. It might be that I have to steal another class, if that's all right, in order to cover it. But we'll go through it. Please raise your hand, make comments, ask questions if you would like to. And I'll probably give you some personal examples from the experiences that I had serving as an elder. Let's begin. Let's go to the first slide here. All I've done is put this text up. And we're going to go through and pick out some phrases here and learn some things from this text. First, I want you to notice that Peter begins and he refers to the elders who are among you. This phrase, though you would think is not that important or we might glaze over it, it says a lot. I want you to look at the phraseology and I want you to follow this logic. We have several visitors with us here today at Willow. But would you appreciate with me that if you are visiting with us, our elders are not responsible for you? Now, we love you. We're glad that you're here. But our elders are not your elders. Now, at what point do elders become responsible? Because we understand there is a difference between a visitor and a member. There has to be. So who are the elders who are among us? There has to be a difference. Who are members here? Who are not? If a person visits the church a certain number of times, do they automatically become a member? Are they automatically under the elders? How would you like to be an elder and there's some arbitrary number? You know, after 4 visits, this person is automatically under your care. You're automatically responsible for this person if they show up 4 times. You don't want to be like that. There has to be a difference between a visitor and a person who is a member. What if a person, they show up for 6 months, or they automatically under your care? 7 months. We have to understand. You know, sometimes people come to visit and they're here to visit their family. Sometimes maybe a person is across town, and so because of that, maybe their grandkids are here. And so maybe they're here very frequently. So when is a person a member? When is a person a visitor? There has to be a way to determine it. And so what we say is, if a person wants to be a part of this congregation and worship under these elders, we say that that person is placing membership. Now, sometimes people don't like that term because they will say, well, you know, I became a member of the church when I was baptized, and that is true. When a person is baptized, they become a member of the universal church. They are a part of the church that belongs to Jesus Christ. But the Lord still expects you to be a member of the church somewhere. He expects you to be a member of a local congregation. You have to place your membership somewhere under some eldership. Now, if you don't like the term placing membership, because for whatever reason that gives some people heartburn, if you don't like that, you can call it joining yourself. Acts 9 and verse 26, when Paul went to Jerusalem, the Bible says he sought to join himself to those brethren. What did he mean by that? I want to be a member of the congregation in Jerusalem. Sometimes people say, I want to be identified with the congregation here. Sometimes people say, I want to work under the oversight of the eldership here. However you want to say it, what we mean by that is you want to be one of the members here so that the elders at this congregation oversee you. So when he talks about the elders that are among you, what he is saying here is these are the elders who are responsible for you. And there has to be something like this, because Hebrews 13:17 says that the elders are going to answer for your souls. If I'm an elder, I want to know which people am I going to answer for. And so we place membership. We identify with the congregation. These are my elders. These are the people that I am responsible for. So we learn a lot from that phrase, the elders which are among you. Now let's go to the next slide. I want you to notice this. Peter says, I am a fellow elder. Now, what do we draw from that? What could we learn? If I don't tell you anything, what could you learn from that statement when Peter says, I am a fellow elder? Anything come to mind? What's that? Okay, we do learn that Peter is married. I hadn't thought about making that point, but you know, the Catholic Church says Peter was what? The first pope. I hear somebody saying it. They say Peter was the first pope, but according to the Catholic Church, the priest and the pope, they have to be celibate. They can't marry. Peter was married. An elder has to be married. But I want you to get this. Peter was a preacher, and yet Peter was also an elder. Now, why is that significant? Because there are some churches who refuse to let the preacher be an elder. They say you can't be a preacher and an elder. I want to lay out some very basic Bible principles, and then I'm going to get to the meat of this. In Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 2, the Bible says, you shall not add unto the word that I command you, neither shall you diminish aught from it. You shall keep the commandments of the Lord that I command you. That is, in Deuteronomy, he said, don't add to the word, don't take away from the word. In Proverbs chapter 30 and verse 6, he says, thou shalt not add unto his words, lest he reprove thee, and thou shalt be found a liar. Revelation 22, 18 and 19, for I testify unto you that every man that hears the words of the book of this prophecy, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and from the holy city, and from the things that are written in this book. What does that mean? In the beginning of the Bible, in the middle of the Bible, at the end of the Bible, the Lord says, don't add to my word, don't take away from my word. Brethren, that certainly applies to the qualifications of elders. We can't add to the qualifications of elders. We can't take away from the qualifications of elders. What is a qualification that someone might try to add to the elders? What might a church do and say, you've got to have this? Maybe something the Bible doesn't list. Can you think of anything? What if a church were to say something like this? Well, we think in order to be an elder, a man has to be at least 60 years old. We think he needs to be older, and so they set an age. Could you see a congregation maybe doing that? Yeah, I could see a church maybe doing that, but you know what? The Bible doesn't state an age. If we set an age, we are adding to the qualifications that God has given. We also cannot take away from the qualifications that God has given. We can't be more strict, and we can't be less strict. And so it could be that a congregation says, well, if a man is the preacher, he can't be an elder. You see what they've done? They've added a qualification that God has not added. Peter was a preacher. Peter was also an elder. Now, maybe it's not the wisest thing to do. I don't know about all that. But we can't add qualifications, and we can't take away qualifications. Sometimes we substitute qualifications. Sometimes we will say, well, this man is a really good businessman, and so we think he's a good leader. He should serve as an elder. Or everybody likes this man. He should be an elder. Or he is a very godly man, but he doesn't have children, but he's a godly man. And so we think we can substitute qualifications. We can't add to, we can't take away, we can't substitute qualifications. I remember several years ago at North Charleston when we were installing elders, we had asked the congregation to turn in names, and when we got the names, we were looking over them, and we had a name turned in of a man who wasn't even married and had no children. But the person who turned his name in thought that he was a very godly man. He was a godly man, but he was a single man with no children. You've got to meet the qualifications. You can't substitute qualifications. I want you to listen to this quote out of Glenn Colley's book that I mentioned, Awake at Night. It deals with the difficult problems that elderships face. He says, I have become increasingly convinced that in selecting our elders, we cannot knowingly compromise even one of the biblical qualifications without the real potential that the church will eventually suffer the unhappy and often eternal negative consequences of that mistake. What is he saying? He's saying God gave us these qualifications, and we can't ignore any of them. Sometimes the church gets kind of lax on one qualification because they'll say, well, he has most of the qualifications, and so they install him. The Lord said you have to have all of these, and the Lord gave them for a reason. And if we install a man who doesn't have them, Glenn's saying eventually we're going to suffer the consequences for that. God gave us these qualifications for a reason. Now, he says here, I'm a preacher and I am an elder. I have served as an elder, and I am not interested in doing it again right now. I am thankful we have good, godly elders, and maybe we have some other men that are qualified. I don't know, but we have a good eldership. But Peter says, because a man is a preacher does not mean he cannot serve as an elder. All right, let's go to the next slide and notice this. He says that the elders are to shepherd the flock of God. What is a shepherd? Somebody tell me what a shepherd is. I'm not talking about as an elder, but a real shepherd. What is a shepherd? Okay, he guards the flock. Flock of what? Typically, it would be sheep, right? Okay, what are some of the responsibilities of a shepherd with regard to the sheep? Okay, he's going to protect the flock. That is certainly one of them. What else? Okay, he's going to make sure that they get food. That's going to be two of the things. Now, when the Lord uses the term shepherd, he does that for a reason. He's making a comparison. First, as someone mentioned, that a shepherd makes sure that the sheep get fed. An eldership has to make sure that the flock, the church, gets fed. Listen to this. This is Acts 20 and verse 28. He says to the elders there, therefore take heed to yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Ghost has made you overseers to shepherd the church of God which he has purchased with his own blood. They are to take heed to the flock. They are to feed the flock. They have to make sure that good spiritual food is given to the flock. They have to make sure that false doctrine is not. Somebody said that a shepherd protects. What would a shepherd protect from? Wolves. coyotes, bears, anything that might come and attack the flock, they're going to make sure that doesn't happen. Listen to this, Acts 20:29, Paul said to the elders, "For I know that after my departure savage wolves shall come in among you, not sparing the flock. Also from among your own selves will men rise up, speaking perverse things to draw away disciples after them." Paul said elders have to watch for the flock because savage wolves will come in, false teachers would come in. How would you like to be an elder and know that you've got the responsibility to make sure that what's being taught in all the Bible classes is sound and that all those teachers have to be sound? What would you do to ensure that that is the case? If you're an elder and you've got all these teachers and all these classes and you are responsible, what would you do? Just tell me your thoughts. What would you do to ensure that what is being taught is the truth? Any thoughts? How would you handle that? What's that? An elder might do that. I've known elderships that do that. I don't know if our elders here do that, but when we were at North Charleston, the elders would take turns and we would sit in the classes and listen to them. Why? Because we wanted to be sure we were responsible that what they were teaching was the truth. How are we going to know? Sometimes we would sit in. Sometimes we would listen to a recording of the class. Why? Because God said that's on our heads. How else might you do this to make sure that elders are teaching the truth or that teachers are teaching the truth? Okay, you might have a deacon that's over this. And that deacon, what would his job be? Maybe he's going to screen these people. Maybe he gives them a doctrinal questionnaire before they can teach. At South Haven we had that, and maybe we have it here, I'm not sure, but we had a doctrinal questionnaire the people had to fill out before they became a teacher. If we found out they had error in a certain area, they would have to be taught or corrected before they could become a teacher. Why? Because elders were protecting the flock. You're not going to bring in a person and let them just teach and you don't know what they stand for. Why? That is their job. And they are going to have to answer for this. And so people need to think about the fact that elders are thinking about the souls of the congregation, but they're also thinking about their own soul because the Lord's going to hold them accountable for this on the day of judgment. And so elders feed, elders protect. What if an eldership found out that there was a person in a congregation that was influencing people for evil? What if they found out that maybe there was a person who was going around and taking people to dinner and they were teaching a false doctrine? What if they found out this person was bringing it up in Bible classes and trying to teach these things? You think that's ever happened in a congregation before? Absolutely. I know of specific examples. What do you do if you're an elder and you find out that that's going on in a congregation? What do you do with that? Okay, you're going to go talk to that person so that you can address it. When I was at the South Haven congregation, we found out that we had an 18-year-old boy in the congregation, and he had persuaded his girlfriend about some things in the church. One of them is that you don't have to partake of the Lord's Supper every Sunday, and that you can partake of the Lord's Supper any day of the week that you want to, and that you don't have to be baptized to go to heaven, and several other things. He was going around to other kids in the youth group and trying to persuade them of this. My son was in the youth group. He came home and said, "Dad, this fellow is teaching this." What was I supposed to do as an elder when I learned that? What was the first thing that I, as an individual, should have done? Okay, you're going to have to verify it. I tell you, the first thing that I did was I took it to the fellow elders. And I said, "Brothers, we've got a problem." Why? Because all of us are responsible for this. What was the next thing we did? We brought him in to talk to us. And we said, "We've heard that this is true. We don't want to believe it. And we're not going to automatically believe it. We want to ask you, is this true?" And he said, "Absolutely it is." And we spent 4 hours meeting with him and talking with him. And he argued and argued and argued that he was right. What's the next thing that you're going to do? What's that? Okay, get him out of class. This is getting to be a difficult situation. This is real. And I was one of the elders that was dealing with this at the time. He had persuaded several of our teens that he was right. We were in a tough spot. Now, he's 18, or he might have been 17, almost 18, so we didn't know what to do. Do we treat him as one of the kids? Do we treat him as an adult? He had a lot of family in that congregation, so the elders are considering that. See, the sort of things elders are having to consider sometimes. And we're thinking, we don't want to have a split in the congregation. How do we handle that? And so what we did was we called in all of the parents, and we said, we want to warn you that this young man is teaching this. We have gone to him, and we have met with him. We called his mother in, and we met with him and his mother together. He would not recant. He would not back off. He was vehement that he was correct. We called in all the parents, and we warned them. Why? Because we're the shepherds, and we wanted to protect them. And he was convincing young people of this. You see, this gets to be a really, really tough situation, the sort of things that elders are dealing with. And how do you handle something specific like that? The Lord doesn't give us specific instructions on how to address something of that nature, but we went to the Bible for principles, and it was a very, very hard situation. When we finally addressed the young people, a number of his family got really, really upset about this. And several of his family left the congregation and they went somewhere else, including him. Now, did we do what we were supposed to do? Looking back, I think that we did. Some elderships might have said, well, we can't do this because we're going to lose a lot of people. And so we're just not going to say anything. That would have been wrong, because shepherds have to take care of the flock. A shepherd has to look out for the wolves. And when it was over, we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it and said, did we do the right thing? We prayed about it. We met with him. We met with his mom. We tried to persuade him. I spent 3 different studies and probably 20 hours studying with him about these things. We were getting nowhere. At the end of the day, we felt like we did right. And we did our best under the circumstances. We still lost probably 20 people over the situation. Family gets involved, and it gets very, very tense. I don't think they would have stood for that for anyone else, but it was family. And so it was a tough thing. What's another thing that shepherds do? What happens if one of the sheep wanders off? What if it's only one? Okay, Luke 15 and verse 4, the Lord says, what man among you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one, does he not leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the one which was lost until he finds him? And when he has found him, he lays him on his shoulders and rejoices. A good shepherd goes and finds the sheep that are lost. That's one of the responsibilities of an elder. You think about all these responsibilities we just talked about, and then think about people who start becoming unfaithful and people who start wandering off. Is it any wonder that elders sometimes get stressed, and sometimes elders say, I've had enough of this? I'm telling you, you need to pray for your elders, and you need to thank God for godly elders. Be appreciative and thankful for the men here. And when they're making decisions, you might think very hard about the things that you don't know and why these decisions might have been made, because they're taking so many things into account and trying to be sure ultimately they're pleasing to God. All right, let's go to the next point. He says, serving as overseers. Now in Acts chapter 20 and verse 28, Paul says to the Ephesian elders, therefore take heed to yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. What is an overseer? Okay, he needs. Well, obviously there should have...
They're not wasn't aware of that. So that tells me that there's a little bit of something they need to know more about what's going on.
And so an overseer is one who is in charge. An overseer oversees. What is the role of an elder? Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17, now listen to this. He says, obey them that have the rule over you, and be submissive, for they watch for your souls. Wow, I didn't even get close to finishing. I'm like halfway done. Maybe Ben would be generous and let me teach another week. But notice this. He says about elders, they are overseers. He says that in 1 Peter 5. He says it in Acts chapter 20. And he says, obey them. Now, if you keep reading in this text, he says that they are to be examples. I have sometimes heard people say that the only authority that elders have is that they are to be examples to the flock, and people are to follow their examples. Is that what this text says when he says they're to be overseers? Listen again to Hebrews 13:17. Obey them. When he says obey them, does that mean they're only examples? Obey them that have the rule over you. Does that sound like they're only examples? Be submissive to them, he says. Obey, they have the rule. Be submissive, for they watch for your souls. Certainly elders are examples, but they're not just examples. They have authority, they have rule, they are overseers, and they must give an account. Now, next week, I guess we'll talk about this. In what area do elders have rule? Elders can't make laws for God. Sometimes I have known elderships that would say this. They have said, we have decided that women can get up and speak in this congregation. We are the elders, we have authority, we have decided that. We've prayed about it, and we've decided that. Can elders, do they have that type of authority? Can they make that kind of a rule? They cannot do that. I've said this many times, and I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Elders only have authority in matters of expediency. What does that mean? Expediency means you're expediting some law. That means God has made a law, and elders are figuring out how to carry it out, how to obey it. For example, God has said that we are to meet on the first day of the week. Elders can't change that. They can't say, let's meet on Monday. The Lord said the first day of the week, but the Lord did not specify the time. The time that we meet is a matter of expediency. And so elders have an underlying command from God that we have to meet, but he hasn't told us the time, so elders have authority to pick the time. Elders can say that we are going to meet at 10 o'clock. Then the congregation has to obey that. They have to follow that. The Lord has told elders to feed the flock of God. The New King James says shepherd the flock. The Old King James says feed the flock. Now, how are they going to feed the flock? Many elderships have decided they'll have Wednesday night services to help feed the flock. That's a matter of expediency. Now that they have said that, it must be obeyed. You see how that works? There has to be some underlying command, and then the elders are figuring out how we're going to obey that command. Elders can't make up commands. They expedite the commands that God has given us. All right, let's go to the next one. I know the bell's going to ring in just a minute. Peter talks about being an elder, and he says it's not by compulsion, but willingly. This is frequently used to teach that an elder must desire the office. Now, in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 1, when you have the qualifications of an elder, before he gives the qualifications, he says this, if a man desires the office of an elder, he desires a good work. Some translations say if he aspires to the office of an elder. One says if he sets his heart on being an elder, he desires a good work. I have frequently heard people say that desiring the office of an elder is one of the qualifications of an elder. I don't believe that is true. I don't believe this is listed as a qualification, but rather I think this is a clarification. I think the Lord is telling us if a man wants to be an elder, that's a good thing. That's an admirable quality. He ought to be commended for that desire. Why does the Lord begin that way? I think it's because of this. I think because sometimes if a man expresses a desire to be an elder, some people might say, well, he wants to be in charge. Well, he's hungry for power. Why does he want to be an elder? So the Lord begins by telling us, don't think that way. It's a good thing. If a man desires to be an elder, it is a good thing. Now, I know the bell just rang, so let's just put a peg down right there, and we'll talk about that some more next week. But thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.